I was right. According to my son, the inventor, those are the three most beautiful words in the English language. I was right. Usually he delivers that declaration with it tongue in cheek. But I'm noticing that the need to be right has permeated our society in a much more serious way. So today I'd like to cover 4 points. 1, our obsession with being right diminishes us. 2, we have no control over what happens to us in life. The only thing we have control over is how we react to what happens to us in life. 3, there is always a gift in every situation, no matter how negative it may seem. And 4, the only answer to defeating the demons is love. Love. The number of jokes about being right permeate our society because that shows how much it is part of our lives. For example, this joke, I'm not always right, but when I'm right, it's usually all the time. Or in my house, there are 2 rules. Rule number 1, my wife is always right. Rule number 2, on those rare occasions when my wife is wrong, refer to rule number 1. So even though we joke about the importance of being right, so many of us today are vehemently committed to being right. That's why our government is in such a stagnant state right now. We have so many physical confrontations between people with differing opinions all over the world. There are videos on the internet of people in fights and being beat up because the perpetrators feel that since they are right, this justifies their acts of violence and cruelty. We see people screaming at each other because one is right and the other is wrong. And they don't even hear each other. They're so busy screaming. The need to be right is a killer. The need to be right creates conflict. Dr. Wayne Dyer posed the question, do you ever notice how hard it is to argue with someone when they're not obsessed with being right? Trouble with having to be right is that it paralyzes us. It freezes us on the spot. It paralyzes our minds so that we cannot accept new ideas. We can't even consider them. It actually cuts us off from the uplifting and the healing energy of infinite intelligence. When working with spirit, we're always growing and expanding and evolving. But being right, the need to be right, stops that process. I'm reminded of a story by the great Mullah Nasruddin. Nasruddin was a 13th century prophet, philosopher, storyteller, trickster. He often made or gave spiritual lessons by using humor. One of the stories he shares, and there are hundreds of them, this great teacher was on a boat being transported down the river to the university where he was going to accept a new exalted position. And as he was leaning back in the boat, thinking about how wonderful he was, how scholarly he was, how smart he was thinking, I am so close. Pretty soon I'll be able to walk on water. And as he was drifting down, having the boatman do all the work, he heard something that greatly disturbed him. On the bank he heard the sound of a man chanting. But he was doing a chant that the teacher knew so well, and the teacher knew it was wrong. The man was doing it wrong. So he had the boatman pull over to the bank so he could get out and go talk to this man who was trying to do this chant incorrectly so that he could help him. So he spent an hour with him, teaching him how to do it correctly. And after he got him doing it right, he felt good about himself, and he went back to the boat and said he is that much closer to being able to walk on water because he is so great. Then he heard the sound of that man who was chanting so beautifully all of a sudden stumble and interrupt and try again and got it wrong, and then there was silence. And then he heard the strangest sound, the flapping of feet on the water. And he looked back, and here was that ignorant peasant running across the top of the water, screaming, great teacher, please stop and teach me again how to do it right. That man didn't need to do it right. All he needed to do was be. The obsession with being right eliminates any possibility for letting the growth energy of infinite intelligence guide us and uplift us. That's why there's an axiom in business that A students will end up working for C students. The reason for that is that A students generally want to be right, and they work very hard to be right, to get the right answer. But when you're out in the world, that is a restrictive behavior because it keeps you from pushing the envelope. It keeps you from breaking the rules. And so A students become employees or they become bureaucrats. The C students are the ones who break the rules. You know, life doesn't care what we think is right or wrong. Life is going to throw whatever it wants at us, except the kitchen sink. And sometimes it even throws that. So we have to learn that we have no control over what life throws at us. We only can control how we respond to it. I've witnessed some dramatic reactions to what is going on in our world today. Because we've got chaos, we've got protests, we've got pandemics, we've got economic collapse. It's a mess. And in this big mess, there's a lot of fear going on, there's a lot of panic. There's also a lot of anger. And I get to see it all in my little space of a gas station where I work. One night I had one of my favorite customers come in and she was storming angry. And I said, what's wrong? She says, I cannot believe that my friends actually believe in this. I said, believe in what? She said, this pandemic. They think it's real, it's a hoax. And she said, I just can't stand it, I can't stand it. I said, okay. She had her opinion, she was right, they were wrong. And she was not going to accept anything else. On the other hand, there are people in deep, deep fear and panic. I was at my cardiologist's office. My cardiologist has a very large waiting room. They do great business. And so I went in and I was in line for my appointment and keeping the social distance as recommended. But the woman in front of me was very panicky. And she turned around and she said, move back, you're too close. Which I did. I knew I was far enough away, but she was upset, so I moved back. And then I watched her, and she was constantly looking around her, backwards and forwards. When the door would open and a new person would come in, she would look and be wary. The woman was in such a state of panic that I thought she could actually give herself a heart attack right there in that space. Fortunately, it was a cardiologist's office. But that's a fear in her eyes. I recognized it. I looked at it and I knew what she was feeling. I knew what she was feeling because I too had felt that same level of panic. I remember it was 1971. I was young in my career in advertising, and I was living in Chicago on the near north side, Lincoln Park West. Lincoln Park West was an uppity street, if you will. It was a street with lots of young professionals with too much money and too much free time and not enough restrictions. So it was sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And I remember out of my upper story window, I could see the zoo, which was the world-famous Lincoln Park Zoo, was right across the street. And I could wake up in the morning to hear the lions roar. and watched the seals frolicking in the pool. Well, one night, my girlfriend and I had a little argument, and she went off to places unknown for a while, and I decided, well, I don't need to do anything about this. I don't need to fret myself over this. I'm pissed off. I'm going to take a break. So I hit a dose of LSD. Wrong move. So when it hit me, rather than the delightful musical tones I used to hear and the wonderful psychedelic colors and all of a sudden I was surrounded by this total blackness. And in that blackness were demons waiting to devour me. The only thing that was keeping them from me was the fact that I was in this dome of light that filled the room and keeping me safe. But the trouble was, it was shrinking. And it kept shrinking little by little. And I knew that eventually it would shrink to the point that they could get me. They could reach me, and as soon as they reached me, my life would be over. They would throw me into, they would drag me into hell. They would devour me. They would do all kinds of terrible things. I couldn't actually see them because it was so dark on the other side of the dome. But I knew they were there. I could feel them. I was so scared that I was crying. I was so scared that my body was shaking. I was terrified. And I did not know what to do. Then an idea hit me. Call your sister. My sister Beverly is 3 years younger than me. We have an interesting relationship. It was always the big brother, little sister thing. She was a nuisance. I would put her down, push her away, and say, go away, you're loquacious, you're this, you're that. But my little sister also had a weapon. She knew exactly how to push my buttons. Every last one of them. And she would not hesitate to do so when she had the chance. And one time she told me, to be so smart, you're really stupid sometimes. So I called Beverly, and I told her what was happening. Now I lived on the north side of Chicago, where all the hip people lived. Beverly lived on the south side of Chicago, where we grew up. And it was a Saturday. She had her own family. But I told her that I was in this panic and I had taken LSD and I was going to die. And it's 30 miles across the city. So 30 miles long and 8 miles wide. It's a big city. It would have taken her 25 minutes to about half an hour to get there, even at night. Beverly said, I'm on my way. Even today, 50 years later, when I think of that, she said, I'm on my way, it hits me. It's a deep emotional reaction because it was such a terrifying moment for me, and I needed her. She was there. So she came. By the time she got there, the dome had shrunk down to maybe like 5 or 10 feet from me. And she took my hand and began to talk me out of it. And by the time she finished, the dome was gone, the demons were gone. I knew that it was her love that got me out of that. The cure is love. The cure against the demons is love. The dome of safety can be stabilized by love. I wanted to tell that woman there in the cardiologist's office, love will get us out of this, love. But I couldn't talk to her. She didn't want me near her. She didn't want me talking to her. But love is the key. Infinite intelligence always provides us with what we need when we need it, but not if we cut ourselves off from it by having to be right. We need how to learn to lock into the power of infinite intelligence. We need to understand and accept and integrate into our systems the fact that infinite intelligence is not only always with us, infinite intelligence is hidden within us. And infinite intelligence, which has created us and everything around us, loves us. It only wants us to be better only wants us to be safe, only wants us to take him to a higher level. Infinite intelligence is a wonderful thing if we open ourselves to it. But we are faced with this terrible time around us, this world of conflict, this world where so many bad things are happening. But the truth of the matter is there is always a gift. No matter how bad it looks, there's always a gift. There's another Nasruddin story I'd like to share with you. Nasruddin decided to retire, so he moved to a different region of the country because he knew that if he tried to retire where he was, they would never leave him alone. So he moved, he found a hilltop. And on this hilltop, he built a house. And he loved it because it was surrounded by thorns. And he says, nobody can get to me up here because there are all these thorns. They're not going to grow anything because of all the thorns and the roughage. But people heard he was there, and they cut their way through the thorns. And pretty soon he had people coming to seek his advice. And at one point, the townspeople came rushing up, and they said, you've got to help us, you've got to help us, all our roosters have died. I said, your roosters have died? All of our roosters have died, and now we can't create chickens, and we won't have anything to eat. What should we do? What is this? And he said, well, it's God's will. God's will? Yeah, it's God's will. Well, you're no help. They left. Soon thereafter, they came rushing up again and they said, all of our fires have gone out. And the next village is so far away, in order for us to get a live coal, because they didn't have matches in the 13th century, they had to use a live coal in order to start fires. And there were no live coals in the village. All the fires were out. What can we do? And he says, it's God's will. We knew you would say that. They stormed away again. Then they came rushing back, and they said, our dogs have died. All of our dogs have died. Now there's no one to bark and warn us of thieves coming. He said, do you have a lot of thieves around here? They said, no, actually, we've never had a thief around here. But our dogs are dead. He said, it's God's will. Ah, yes, right, God's will. But he thought about it. He said, the roosters have died, the fires have died, and the dogs have died. There's something at a higher level going on here. So he sat up that night, thinking about it. He began to hear strange noises. So he sneaked out of his house, into the woods, and there on the next hillside, he spotted a group of armed men, many armed men. And at the head of them rode up their leader. And after a few minutes, the leader says, well, men, we've had a good run of it, going from town to town, pillaging and burning and gathering such treasures as we found. But it looks like our luck has run out. Where's the smoke from the fires? Where are the dogs barking? It's almost daylight and there are no roosters crowing. It's obvious this town is abandoned. Let's go on to something else. And they left. There is a gift in every situation, no matter how negative it may be. But we cannot see those gifts if we are stuck in here at this lower vibrations of reality where conflict and lack and pains and anger reside. At this level of vibration, there is no peace. In fact, peace is impossible at this level of vibration because conflict will always arise. So when I started, I told you I wanted to cover 4 points. 1, our obsession with being right diminishes us. It shuts us down to our access of infinite intelligence. 2, we have no control over what happens to us. We can only control our reaction to what happens to us. 3, there's always a gift in any situation, no matter how negative it may appear. And 4, the only answer to defeating the demons is love. demons we face are our own. They live within our minds, and the only way to defeat them is to rise above and to enter into the sanctuary of love. On the lower planes of vibrations, fear rules. It causes stress. It contracts our muscles. It weakens our immune system. It can make us sick. Love reverses that. Just like a massage relaxes the muscles and gives the body a state of peace, love opens up our spirits and uplifts them. We must open our hearts to infinite intelligence because that is where love resides. We must allow infinite intelligence to carry us to a higher plane where our vision can be filled with beauty instead of the darkness down here where pain and lack and suffering rule. We can attain those higher vibrations. It's in our nature. Infinite intelligence is right here in our hearts. The kingdom of heaven is within us. If we will allow ourselves to connect to that higher vibration, then our lives will change for the better. Our lives will change, will change for the better. And when our lives begin to change, we will attract others of a like vibration whose lives are changing, who want to rise with us. As Reverend Bonnie said a few weeks ago, your vibe attracts your tribe. As each of us rises, we help those around us to rise. It's contagious. And as they begin to rise, they help those around them to rise as well, to elevate their vibration. It's contagious. And as they rise and elevate their vibration, those around them will be affected. And their vibrations will rise. It's contagious. And that is how the world will change. Not by force,